Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I want to do a quick book haul. I just recently had the opportunity to go visit my sister who just had a baby, which is really exciting. And while I was there, I was able to go book shopping. I've mentioned before on the channel that I don't have a bookstore in the town that I live in. So when I get to go in and visit my family, it's usually a time to go shopping for books. I also apologize because I feel like I'm going to be breathing really heavily and my throat is a little bit sore. When you have kids who are still in school, which we're really fortunate that they are because our place of residence is not in lockdown, germs circulate your house so much more frequently and everybody in the whole house gets sick. And in the age of this virus, we are all stuck in together because obviously you can't go to work or go to school when you have symptoms. So it's been a really fun week, we'll say. But I do want to film this before I start to read these books because I feel like that might color the way that I describe them. So I would like to at least get this up despite the cold symptoms. So hopefully it won't get in the way of the video too much, but we'll just roll with it. So the first book that I want to talk about is Daughter of the Forest by Juliette Marillier. This is a book, I'm not gonna lie, I almost bought this. I really did buy this because the name Juliette is really special to me, and it usually catches my eye when I see that something like either a show or a book or something has been made by someone named Juliette. So that is what caught my eye about this book. But it had been recommended on Goodreads as one of those, you read this, so you might like this book. And essentially what I can tell is that it is a historical fantasy that is based off the fairy tale of, I think it's the six swans, maybe? I don't know the fairy tale personally, but I really like historical fantasy that is set in, the UK. I like that kind of like pagan magic, those types of themes. So I think that I really will like this one. The cover is very pretty as well. And this is the beginning of a trilogy. So I'm hoping that this will end up being a new favorite for me. I've seen a lot of positive reviews from reviewers who seem to enjoy the same types of things that I do in fantasy. So I am really hopeful for this one, and I am excited that I found it. I had never heard of it before, and I'm really excited to have found it. So that one is one that I'm hoping to get to read relatively soon. Coming up next is the Faithful and the Fallen series. I'm just going to try to heave these up because they're really heavy. The Faithful and the Fallen series by John Gwynne. This was, I'm going to try not to talk with a bunch of books in front of my face, but this was one of my goals of actually going to the bookstore, was to pick up these books. So The Faithful and the Fallen has been really popular on BookTube over the last 6 months or so, and I've heard a lot of booktubers that I like and whose opinions I really admire and whose tastes I feel align with my tastes really well have talked about this and really talked it up. What kind of bumped it all the way up on my TBR is when I heard Mike from Mike's Book Reviews talk about The Animal Companion. I don't know how I heard so much about these books, but hadn't managed to catch that there is an animal companion in this story. But that is one of my favorite fantasy, I don't know if you call it a trope when there's an animal companion, but it's one of my favorite elements of a fantasy story. And so it immediately bumped it up on the TBR. I did get Malice from the library because I wanted to make sure that the writing style was going to be for me before I invested in the whole series at once. But I got Malice from the library. I read it in a night and loved it. And everybody says that the series only improves from there. So I did not hesitate to buy all of them. I was really happy they were all in stock. So the bookstore I went to had one copy of each book, and I took that as a sign that I needed to buy them all. So I am so excited to read this. I don't know if I'll make it through the whole series in February. If they all end, in a way that makes you need the next book, then I'll probably just binge them back to back. I know a lot of people don't like to do that. They like to give themselves time to settle in, to read. I don't have that kind of self-control, so I will probably read them back to back. that is the plan, and I am super excited to do that. The next book is a new release for 2021, and that is Winter Keep by Kristin Cashore. I think I mentioned in a previous video that I used to read a lot of YA fantasy. I don't read a ton anymore, and especially now that I've gotten back into reading adult fantasy and I'm more used to those slower unfurling plot lines, the bigger focus on character and theme as opposed to really plot or action driven stories, I don't find myself gravitating toward young adult as much anymore. But Kristin Cashore's Graceling Realm series is one of my favorite YA series of all time. I think that she does everything really well. Her characters are beautifully written. Her writing is really nice. I think she does actually think about theme a lot, and the themes of her stories really shine through when she writes them. The romances in her books I always really like. Even if they have a bumpy start, they kind of evolve through mutual respect and understanding. So I really can't find much of a fault in her writing, and I really love this series. So I am so excited, so looking forward to reading this one. I will probably pick this up before I dive back into The Faithful and the Fallen because, like I said, I want to binge those and I want to get Winter Keep out of the way before I do that. So Winter Keep will probably be my next read, and I am really looking forward to it. My next purchase was another series, and this one I actually ordered from Book Depository because they don't stock it. I don't know if they stock it in Canada at all, but they didn't stock it at the bookstore that I frequent. So it is, the series is called The Books of Woad. And they're not self-published, but they were published by a small indie publisher, which I think is called like Forest Books or something. But this is a series that I read. I think I became aware of the book series when I read an article. I don't know if it was a BuzzFeed article, but it was one of those listicles that had the best LGBTQ fantasy books. And the first book on this, in this series, called Green Woad, popped up on that list, and it sounded like something that would really appeal to me. So basically what these books are is they're historical fantasy, and they are a retelling of the myth of Robin Hood. And instead of the romance being between Robin Hood and Marian, they are actually brother and sister. Their parents are heavily involved in pagan magic, and they are kind of the lord and the lady of the forest. So it is understood that Robin and his sister will one day wear those mantles, that he will be lord, she will be maiden. And they befriend a noble boy named Gamelin, whose father is kind of the lord who rules over their portion of England. And so it basically follows Robin, Marian, and Gamelin as their friendship develops, and then as that friendship turns into something romantic between Robin and Gamelin. It is definitely romance heavy, so if that's something that you don't enjoy in your fantasy, then you probably wouldn't like this. But the author of these books, whose name is J. Toulos Henning, I had to look down because I couldn't remember. She has some of the most atmospheric writing that I have ever read. Her writing is beautiful. She can capture, like I said, capture that atmosphere of the forest and of those early magics. She just builds up the world so expertly. And this is the type of world building that I really love. And so now I'm going to continue on with the rest of the series and see how that goes. If the other 3 books live up to the quality of the first 2, then I feel like this is a huge contender for my favorite fantasies of all time. The next purchase is the first in a series that everybody has read and everybody knows. So I finally picked up book 1 in the Wheel of Time. I have been thinking of reading The Eye of the World for what feels like my whole life, but it is one of those fantasy series that everybody talks about, that everybody knows. It is a fantasy staple and kind of is one of those backlisted fantasies that I really need to get to. I don't know when I'm going to start this because, again, I find it really hard to leave series hanging. I know through watching BookTube, I see a lot of videos of people who have started multiple series and they have these lists of all these big series. I don't tend to do that. I need to finish the series that I start, so I have a very binge heavy personality, I guess. Like if I like something, I just want to do it and I want to get it done. And so I don't tend to leave a lot of series hanging. Obviously, when there's books that haven't been released yet, I'm not opposed to starting series that haven't finished. So I definitely do have some open-ended series, but they don't tend to last very long. So I'm going to think about when I'm actually going to start reading The Wheel of Time, because I know it's going to be a commitment. I have heard that there is a slog of books in the middle, and I don't know how I'm going to feel about that. I don't do really well with audiobooks. I find it hard to focus, so I don't know if I can rely on having those as a backup. But I am going to start it sometime this year. I just need to decide when and decide how I'm going to document it. I was thinking of maybe doing some reading vlogs, like spoilery vlogs, because this is a book that it seems like everybody has read. I don't think that would work well for like new releases or books that people don't want to be spoiled for, but for a book like this that, you know, basically everyone in the entire world except me has read, it might go over fairly well. But I'm gonna give it some thought and then decide when to start in on this big series. Next up are just a couple of special editions. I, before Christmas, picked up the Mina Lima edition of Alice in Wonderland, which is this, so there is this series of books that is published or designed by Mina Lima. And basically they have picked a bunch of children's classics and have given them these gorgeous covers. And then on the interior, they have like these very interactive elements. They're beautiful, and my kids really love the Alice in Wonderland ones. So I would like to pick up all the ones that they have released. So when I went into the city, I managed to find these two that were in stock. This is The Secret Garden and Pinocchio. And so I grabbed those for our collection. I think children's classics, my kids are 5 and 6. My 5-year-old is definitely more wiggly than his sister, so he doesn't always stay still throughout long chapter books, but she loves it. She loves to sit down and listen for as long as I will read. So I think children's classics are a great way to read to your kids. You can kind of make up for some of the dry language with, you know, the interactive reading, the silly voices, and all the things that kids love. But it also opens up a huge new expanse of vocabulary, of ideas. You know, the way that stories were written and the things that were deemed acceptable for children a couple hundred years ago are very different than today. And my husband and I, we're pretty free parents. Like, we don't shield them from a lot of things. They've had the really unfortunate experience of having already lost a family member, so they're very well acquainted with the fact that people die and those kinds of concepts. So there isn't really a whole lot outside of like gratuitous violence or sexual content that we wouldn't expose them to. And I think that children's classics, like these works of literature, don't speak down to kids. They recognize that kids are usually a lot smarter than we give them credit for. They have these big expansive imaginations, and they can handle a lot of the things that we give them. So I am super excited to read these with the kids. I personally haven't read either of these books, so I'm looking forward to reading them as well. I do enjoy a children's classic every now and then. They tend to be less dense than some of the classics for adults. So with these gorgeous editions, it will make it really easy to read through these. The last new book that I bought was Hall of Smoke by H.M. Long. This is a 2021 release that I had on my new releases to look forward to list. I don't think I did a video about that, but I do record that in my own reading journal every year. And so I have a list of books that are coming out that I'm really looking forward to reading. And this book was on that list. I honestly don't really know what it's about. I think it's about a warrior, yes, a battle-hardened priestess of the goddess of war. So it's about a warrior priestess. That's really all that I need to know. I don't know much about the plot beyond that, and I'd like to keep it that way. So I kind of look at the taglines and see if it's something that I might be interested in. And this is one of the 2021 releases that I decided to just go ahead and purchase. Hopefully I'll like it. I'm not sure, but I'm gonna hopefully read it sometime this month or next, and maybe put up a review to see, you know, just to talk about my thoughts a little bit. But I am looking forward to this one as well. The final two purchases on this list were books that I have read already and just needed to pick up. So the first one is Cersei by Madeline Miller, which is a feminist retelling of the myth of Cersei, just kind of looking at the negative aspects of her personality that are often discussed in Greek mythology and framing them in a different way. I really love Madeline Miller's writing. Her book, The Song of Achilles, is one of my favorite books of all time, and the writing is just as gorgeous here in Cersei. I like the way that she can turn these myths on their head without changing the content. It's just a shift in perspective. And perspective and interpretation are two things that I think about a lot, that I like to read about, that I put a lot of thought into when I'm reading something or when I'm listening to someone. My job involves listening a lot. And so I think a lot about perspective and how it shapes our own stories, how it shapes our own mental health. And what I really admire about Madeline Miller is her ability to shift perspective and make us recognize that you can see things in a really different way without changing a whole lot of the content. And I think that it takes a really talented writer to be able to do that. And I have a copy of The Song of Achilles and just wanted to add this one to my shelf along with that. The last book that I picked up is Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas, which was one of my favorite reads of last year. I mentioned that I don't read a lot of YA fantasy anymore, but when things are getting really big buzz, a lot of people are talking about them, I find it really hard to stay away. And so people had been praising this all last year. It follows a transgendered boy named Yadriel, who is involved in kind of spiritual and revival magic. He lives in a cemetery with his family and would like to be taken seriously as a boy, and his family is having a difficult time doing that. And so it follows his journey as he encounters the spirit of a boy that he had gone to school with and is trying to solve the mystery of how his spirit came to be in the graveyard, essentially. It is also very romance heavy. It is a really cute romance. The writing is really crisp. The story trucks along at an excellent pace, and it is Aiden Thomas's debut novel. I read this one through the library, and just because it was so good and I would love to support debut authors, it's difficult to make your way in the publishing world right now. So I figured that since I got such enjoyment out of it, it would be a good thing to go out and purchase it and just support him a little bit. So I loved this one, would highly recommend to anyone who likes YA fantasy, and it was the final book that I purchased this past weekend. So those are all the books that I purchased last weekend when I went to visit my sister. I had a ton of gift cards from Christmas, so it was excellent because I feel like it was a very lucrative book haul without having to spend any money, which is always nice. We also did pick up, my kids are really into Captain Underpants and Phoebe and the Unicorn, which is a comic book series for young kids. So they also were able to get a couple of books themselves, which they always look forward to. And that is really it. I don't buy books very often. I do have a pretty heavy backlist. I tend to get a lot of books as gifts, and I would really like to try to make my way through those books. And then I use my library a lot as well, either on my Kindle, which I actually have a friend who lives in the United States who lets me borrow from her library. So that's how I get to keep using my library through Kindle, even though I'm in Canada. And I also get audiobooks through my own Canadian library that I just listened to through Libby on my iPhone. So I will still be picking up some new releases. I will get them through the library, but otherwise I'm hoping that I have enough books at home to tide me over for a little while. But if any of you have been book shopping recently, I would love to know what you have picked up. If you've read any of these books and liked or disliked them, please let me know, and I'll see you soon. Bye.